All right, everybody, welcome. Once again, thank you so much for coming today to our UCLA Pritzker Center Summit 5 Years Forward Progress and Partnership at the Intersection of Domestic Violence and Child Welfare. Today's event is generously supported by the Blue Shield Foundation of California. We are also thankful to Van Nuys Charities for their early support of this work. And as always, we are grateful to the Anthony Pritzker Family Foundation for its generous and longtime support of the UCLA Pritzker Center. We would also like to extend our thanks to the many partners across the domestic violence and child welfare communities for lending their time, expertise, and passion to this work. It is and always has been a collective effort on behalf of survivors and their children. My name is Taylor Dudley. I'm the Executive Director for the UCLA Pritzker Center, and I'm pleased to introduce our UCLA student co-hosts who will support our event today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Krisha Vyas, and I am a third-year majoring in political science and communications. I am a research assistant at the UCLA Pritzker Center, and I plan to pursue a career in law. As a land-grant institution, the UCLA Pritzker Center acknowledges our presence, digital or otherwise, on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. We pay respect to the ancestors, elders, and relatives past, present, and emerging. We are based at UCLA in Los Angeles, California, and we will do our best to share information relevant to all jurisdictions, but please bear in mind applicable state law and local policy. Questions may be submitted through the Q&A function, and time permitting, we will do our best to respond. This event is being recorded. It will be shared on our YouTube channel and on social media. We will also post it on our website, and my colleague Mia will put those links into the chat.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mia Yamamoto. I am a second-year undergraduate student majoring in political science and public affairs. I am the Communications and Operations Assistant at the UCLA Pritzker Center, and I plan to pursue a career in law. Today, I will be supporting the chat and any tech issues, so please feel free to message me if I can help with anything.
Thanks, Krisha and Mia. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Espino, and I am a fourth-year majoring in Education and Social Transformation Studies. I am also a research assistant at the UCLA Pritzker Center, and I plan to pursue a career in public policy. Today's event will include multiple sessions. We'll kick things off with remarks from our partners at the Blue Shield Foundation of California. We will then take a look at a newly released brief from our UCLA Pritzker Center, highlighting 5 years of strategic investments, research and advocacy at the intersection of child welfare and domestic violence. Next, LA County DCFS will share insights from an innovative domestic violence and child welfare pilot in the Antelope Valley. We'll then hear timely updates on legislative and policy developments from staff supporting Assemblymember Lackey, Supervisor Horvath, and Supervisor Barger. After that, we'll move into a powerful panel conversation with survivors of domestic violence and DV advocates. We'll close with a forward-looking panel focused on progress and the next steps ahead. I am now pleased to introduce Carolina Morales from the Blue Shield Foundation of California, our project funder. Ms. Morales serves as a senior program officer. We are thankful to the Blue Shield Foundation of California and would like to acknowledge the many members of your team, including Richard, Lucia, Hillary, and TJ, for supporting this effort. Turning it over to you, Carolina.
Wonderful. Thank you for that introduction and for all the gratitude for the great team that works on this at the foundation. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carolina Morales, a senior program officer at Blue Shield of California Foundation. For over 20 years, the foundation has invested in our dual mission to make health equitable and to end domestic violence while serving the most impacted, under-resourced communities of color in California. We believe that domestic violence and inequities in healthcare are caused by deep-rooted systemic issues of racism, gender, and economic injustices. Through our work, we understand that domestic violence is everywhere. In fact, more than 58% of Californians have been affected by domestic violence. Therefore, at the foundation, we promote and partner with organizations that address inequities and drivers of violence because we know that intimate partner abuse is healable and preventable. I lead the team focused on breaking the cycle of domestic violence at the foundation. And one of our strategic priorities includes advancing prevention policies that prevent unnecessary family separations where children are placed away from their caregivers. That's why we're proud partners of the UCLA Pritzker Center for Strengthening Children and Families. At the foundation, we're making strategic investments in Los Angeles County because it is home to one of the largest child welfare systems in the country. Therefore, LA County sits at the intersection of scale, diversity, and complexity, making it a powerful place to drive meaningful systems change. Our goal is to leverage local solutions that can inform broader reforms. From legislation to funding priorities, frontline practice, and cross-system coordination, LA County can help to shape child welfare policy and practice nationwide. At the same time, we know that systems do not work for all survivors, and that many people who experience domestic violence do not involve authorities. This is especially true in under-resourced communities of color, where survivors often do not report abuse or seek help from the police due to valid fears of traumatization, criminalization, or escalation. We need to remember this so that our solutions can address communities that are afraid of authorities and some government entities. And some of the data backs this. An article published by a Los Angeles-based news outlet cites evidence shown by UCLA Pritzker's research. They report that Black children accounted for nearly 1/4 of foster youth, though they made up 7% of all county kids. About 100 indigenous youth were foster kids, double that of their county population, and Latine children accounted for almost 2 in 3 foster children. We're intentionally working to support solutions that move away from punitive failure to protect frameworks, which often penalize survivors. This is why Pritzker's work is critical. We are supporting approaches that advance assessments of risk more holistically and respond with services, safety planning, and support. When it is safe to do so, keeping families together leads to better outcomes for children and caregivers alike. This requires investments in prevention, economic stability, trauma-informed services, and coordinated responses across child welfare and domestic violence systems. We have the data and lived experience accounts that tell us that a shift in practice and not just policy is paramount. Our investments support training, implementation, and cross-agency collaboration so that policy reforms translate into real changes for families on the ground. We're proud to see the results from our investments in UCLA Pritzker Center, particularly the changes in the Antelope Valley, as well as the ones happening across LA County. Our partnership with UCLA Pritzker connects research, pilot programs, and close collaborations with government partners to drive meaningful change for survivors. By grounding child welfare system improvements in both data and lived experience, testing new approaches in real-world settings, and partnering with relevant public agencies to scale what works, we help ensure innovations move from pilots to lasting policy and practice change that improves outcomes for survivors and families. Thanks, Taylor and the entire team at UCLA Pritzker for your bold and very grounded work in child welfare improvements.
Thank you. Thank you for all your support. I am now pleased to introduce Dr. Brenda Tully and Nancy Olivares. Dr. Tully is one of two research directors at the UCLA Pritzker Center. Nancy serves as the Director for Policy and Community Impact. Dr. Tully, I am turning it over to you and your team.
Thank you, Chris. Nancy will begin our research presentation by reviewing findings from the pilot study we conducted in the Antelope Valley that Carolina just mentioned. This will provide background to our current study findings, which will follow. Nancy, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tilly. So, hi everyone. I'm going to begin by highlighting our previous report, which laid the foundation for the work we'll be sharing today. So, back in 2023, the UCLA Pritzker Center, in partnership with the Valley Oasis, a domestic violence service provider, and the DCFS Lancaster Regional Office conducted a pilot study titled Collaborative Reform in Child Welfare for Families Experiencing Domestic Violence in the Antelope Valley. And the goal for this pilot was to strengthen how the child welfare system responds to families experiencing domestic violence. This study was conducted in the Antelope Valley for several reasons. The Antelope Valley's growing population, the high percentage of children in the population there, and it has among the highest rates of child poverty in the county. The study began with focus groups involving parent survivors, domestic violence service providers, and child welfare staff to examine referral practices, the survivors' experiences accessing services, and opportunities for improvement. In response to early findings, DCFS, Lancaster, and Valley Oasis implemented cross-system trainings and domestic violence consultations for child welfare staff, which were subsequently evaluated by the UCLA Pritzker Center. And next slide. Thank you. So now we learned a lot of things that parent survivors faced. And this included that parent survivors face numerous challenges and barriers to accessing services, which included financial and housing barriers that often prevented them from leaving an abusive relationship, complex trauma and mistrust, which made system navigation difficult, service gaps that prevented timely access to required services, lack of service connections that often meant survivors had to figure things out on their own. We also learned that there were various dynamics at play, most notably racial bias that reproduced patterns of power and control often experienced by survivors of domestic violence. There was also challenges accessing services, which created barriers to meeting case plan requirements. And there was evidence of secondary traumatic stress among child welfare staff and service providers that compromised their capacity to effectively engage with survivors. Next slide, thank you. Additionally, we found that collaboration works. When caseworkers provided warm handoffs, it helped survivors connect with services. Secondly, we also found that cross-system trainings improved the child welfare staff's understanding of domestic violence dynamics. And lastly, we also found that consultation with domestic violence experts helped child welfare staff apply new knowledge in their work with families, and that collaboration improved support for survivors, their children, and connection to services. Now I'm going to hand it back to my colleague, Dr. Tilly. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I will now present the results of our study that recently concluded, 5 years forward, progress and partnership at the intersection of domestic violence and at the intersection of child welfare and domestic violence. Next slide, please. The study was conducted in two parts. I'll describe the first part and then the second part. The first part involved a survey of Los Angeles County Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services administrative staff. The purpose was to understand administrators' perceptions of multiple things. So, improvements from 2019 to the present in DCFS practices, policies, and partnerships pertaining to families experiencing system involvement due to domestic violence. Administrators' familiarity with 4 specific changes that DCFS implemented. Current DCFS practices and partnerships. Administrators' domestic violence related knowledge and skills and access to supports in their work, and priorities for next steps in this work. Next slide. 49 administrators completed the survey between December 2025 and early this month. They were mostly women, and more than half were in their current roles for 5 or more years. There was strong representation from region-based leadership, with nearly half of administrators supervising regional emergency response and regional case services. About 20% of administrators supervised AB 12 and other special projects. Other sections supervised are listed here. We really want to thank everyone who completed the survey. The responses received were thoughtful and generative, and we'll present the results now. Next slide. Administrators perceived progress in responses to domestic violence across practice areas from 2019 to 2025. The greatest perceived improvement was in the first bar we see there. And if you look at the dark line going vertically and look to the right of that, we see that the greatest perceived improvement was in the identification of domestic violence among parents and caregivers. As we go down the bars, we see less perceived improvement, but less perceived improvement. So we see that risk assessment had somewhat less perceived improvement. Safety planning and service linkage had the least. Overall, administrators said that more consistency across programs and regions is needed. Room for growth in all practice areas, especially safety planning and service linkages, were identified. Next slide. Administrators' familiarity with 4 specific changes that DCFS implemented agency-wide varied widely. If we look at the first bullet point, administrators were most familiar with the revised policy on the designation of domestic violence child maltreatment as either emotional or physical abuse, not general neglect. Administrators were less familiar with the last 2 bullet points, the reintroduction of domestic violence to the structured decision-making hotline tool, and the addition of a domestic violence consultant to the child protection hotline. Administrators were least familiar with the second bullet point, which is required documentation of domestic violence at the end of an investigation. Results suggested that policy level changes were more widely recognized than operational changes. Next slide. Self-assessment findings showed administrators' agreement with the first 2 statements. The highest agreement was related to understanding how domestic violence affects child safety and supporting staff who are working in the context of domestic violence. There was slightly less agreement on the middle 2 bullet points, receiving sufficient domestic violence training and the support needed to respond effectively to domestic violence through a culturally responsive lens. Administrators shared the least agreement with the last bullet points, understanding how domestic violence affects parenting practices, and having access to domestic violence content experts inside and outside DCFS. These results highlighted needs for access to DV-related structural supports like the content experts. Next slide. In terms of current practices, administrators generally agreed that responsive practices are currently in place, but there was variation. Administrators showed the strongest agreement with the first bullet point, which again is consistent identification of domestic violence. Again, there was some varied agreement regarding the accuracy of risk assessment related to domestic violence. and also tracking with the change over time perceptions, administrators perceived weaker and more varied, or shared weaker and more varied agreement on the last three bullet points related to comprehensive and effective safety planning. Families are connected to appropriate services in a timely manner, and sufficient partnerships exist with domestic violence service providers. These findings track with administrators' perspectives of change over time. So takeaways from, next slide, please. Takeaways from the survey. Administrators felt that considerable progress had been made since 2019 in how DCFS responds to families experiencing domestic violence. They perceived identification and risk assessment practices to be stronger than safety planning, service linkages, and collaboration for cases involving domestic violence. And administrators' familiarity with major changes varied widely. DCFS administrators shared additional insights and recommendations, which you can read about in our report. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to shift gears here. A few minutes ago, Nancy shared the findings from the Antelope Valley pilot that we completed in 2024. That took place, if you look at the map on the right, in the gold area of the map, so the northern part of LA County. After that study, we wanted to learn how applicable those findings were to other parts of Los Angeles County, so we recruited parent survivors in the rest of LA County to explore this. And on the map, you can see that the survivors were from a variety of areas across the southern part of LA County. We held 7 focus groups with 27 parent survivors. Next slide, please. All participants identified as women. The number of children they had ranged from 1 to 4 or more, and they had different racial and ethnic identities, with Latina and Black or African American most common. For many focus group participants, experiences of domestic violence and child welfare were intergenerational. In the figure, we see that more than half had childhood experiences of domestic violence between parents. Over 1/3 had experienced child welfare as children, and nearly 1/3 had both of these experiences in childhood. Next slide. Moving on to the findings, the qualitative findings. Overall, parent survivors' experiences were remarkably consistent in both the Antelope Valley and the current study. The findings documented obstacles to parent survivors progressing through child welfare case plans, aspects of collaboration that supported progress, and urgent needs for ongoing policy, practice, and partnership across systems. First, we'll talk about a few of the obstacles. Next slide. Parent survivors confronted repeated systemic failures that intensified complex trauma and mistrust that Nancy mentioned earlier. These became characterized as institutional betrayal. This parent survivor captured the definition saying, quote, "I agree with further traumatized by the court system, by the police system, everything. You expect these people to protect you. Instead, they turn on you. I got accused of failing to protect my son when I'm trying to protect him by seeking help. But to have the whole system turn back against me, that was so unexpected." End quote. Next slide. Parent survivors identified experiencing anti-Black bias, ethnic, immigrant, and socioeconomic biases within child welfare, domestic violence services, law enforcement, and the courts. Biases and racism created barriers to immediate safety needs being met and to receiving help over time, which Carolina referenced in her remarks. Parent survivors also faced economic and housing barriers. Without financial and material help to mitigate the costs of establishing a new household, reunification among survivors and their children could be delayed or threatened. Next slide, please. As in our earlier study, parents in this study were often in the position of having to figure things out on their own. They needed information about how the child welfare system and dependency court worked. The same was true for family and criminal courts. Additionally, parent survivors needed clarity about child welfare and court expectations. In one example, a parent survivor recalled responding to a child welfare caseworker who told her to wait until her first court date for more information. The parent survivor emphasized her response, saying, quote, "I had to tell them, why am I going to wait to get to court? What is it that you're asking of me? What's the next step? What do I need to do? Because I was trying to get my kids back." End quote. Next slide, please. Service gaps created challenges for parent survivors. They described having a hard time getting legal representation as survivors of domestic violence due to cost. And momentum was lost when their legal cases moved between dependency court and family court. Another service gap was identified. Many parent survivors expressed concern about the lack of services and accountability for people who commit domestic violence. Sharing children with an abusive former partner often meant continued contact, leaving parent survivors to ask, quote, "Where's the help for the perpetrator? You know what I mean?" And this is speaking from a victim standpoint, end quote. Next slide, please. Children developed unique emotional and behavioral needs during foster care and through ongoing contact with law enforcement, courts, and shared custody arrangements. Parent survivors did their best to meet their children's evolving needs while also working to repair their relationships with their children. This responsibility was often more difficult following reunification. A parent survivor shared, quote, "The trauma that occurs in a disconnected family is so devastating. I do not think that the child welfare department understands or even society understands. When you take a parent and child away from each other, even when it's for child safety, trauma occurs. And when you're going to bring them back together, there are so many things that happen in this in between of when you're gone from each other. Both the parent and the child change, and not for the better." End quote. Access to robust aftercare, providing team-based treatment like wraparound services, was extremely limited. Parent survivors expressed the need for more comprehensive, longer-term support to promote stability and healing among them and their children. Importantly, these services would be community-based and trauma and culturally informed. What I have presented so far represents the obstacles parent survivors often navigated as they tried to work through their case plans. Now let's talk about what helped. Next slide, please. When professionals across systems collaborated with parent survivors directly, survivors felt supported and progressed more efficiently through their case plans, like was mentioned in the Antelope Valley study. Collaboration looked like caseworkers making direct service referrals, domestic violence advocates tailoring guidance for how to navigate systems as a survivor, and attorneys providing information about how the courts worked. In addition, collaboration included connecting with peer support programs like the DCFS Parents in Partnership Program. When people with lived experience of domestic violence and the child welfare system provided tailored support, parent survivors had a guide through one or more systems. Building on this concept, parent survivors also envisioned coordinators at the county level to help survivors connect with and navigate county departments designated to provide different resources. A parent survivor shared, quote, "I feel like DCFS, DPSS, and the court system should have a major main department of experienced DV attorneys, social workers, and even the health insurance company." End quote. Finally, parent survivors viewed three things as critical to safety: safely sustaining them and their children in the community, upstream prevention before families reach a crisis, early intervention as envisioned through mandated supporting, and the amplified voices of parent survivors in all change efforts. Next slide. In summary, the focus group findings conveyed urgent needs exist among parent survivors across Los Angeles County. Practical solutions also exist. And early intervention and upstream prevention grounded in community are needed to keep parent survivors and their children safely together. Next slide. Now we'll take a step back to look at the alignment among parent survivors and DCFS administrators. These two groups called for the following: cross-system service coordination and partnerships, increased economic and housing resources, filling service gaps for children. Next slide, please. Engagement with people who commit domestic violence, including people with lived experience and DCFS direct service staff in change efforts and implementation, and increase upstream efforts to promote safety for families and community. Again, thank you to all of our participants. More information is available in our report, and I look forward to our panelists' remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Tolley and Nancy, for your incredibly insightful findings. Next, we will hear from Lisa Whitecrow from the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for being here today.
Hi,
Nancy.
Taylor.
Hi, welcome. We're
Thank
glad to have you. So Nancy gave us an overview of the Antelope Valley pilot. Do you have anything else to add about how it worked within DCFS?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. So the pilot was really bore out of a shared awareness and an acknowledgement that deeper collaboration and understanding was needed to support the families in the Antelope Valley. And we all know that the work of a children's social worker is very complex and there are so many moving parts. So we really felt grateful to be selected and we were very open to needing deeper understanding and really a partner that would support us in our growth as practitioners and individuals working with the community. So we also had to keep in mind that there's some really sensitive and unique challenges up in the Antelope Valley, and that secondary trauma is real and can impact decision making. So, awareness and self reflection and an openness to growing together were some of the fundamental and key components to this partnership. I also think that some of the success of this was from the beginning being part of the development of the pilot. We came to the table, as you both know, Dr. Tully and yourself, for a long, long time and really had to think out what a successful partnership would look like. I recall sharing in one of the early meetings that we attended my own experience as a children's social worker and then a supervisor, and how I had had a go-to person when I was earlier in my career. She was a subject matter expert in the field of domestic violence. And I would reach out to her, I would consult with her, and she would really help shed and enlighten me on my interpretation of what I was seeing. And I needed that go-to person. And so when she retired, I really kind of felt at a loss. Who could I go to? Because I knew that I wasn't a subject matter expert, despite my best efforts to do everything that I could to support families. So I remember when we were talking and we realized that co-location could be an incredible opportunity to further this partnership. And from there, we kind of hit the ground running, worked on operational agreements, and worked to ensure that we could have not only our consultant be co-located at our regional office with our staff, but that equally we would have a social worker that could be co-located at the Valley Oasis shelter to provide support to their staff who were having direct interfacing with the community. So when we were working with Shanice, who was our consultant, she had not only lived experience, but just a wealth of knowledge to be able to share with us. And so trust was built, that partnership deepened, and staff really came to rely on her expertise as they consulted on the referrals that were in front of them. So it was a really impactful opportunity for our staff, and I think equally for the Valley Oasis staff.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So, given all of that, what are some of the key takeaways from that pilot for DCFS. And I ask because at the time that we did the pilot, you were the regional administrator for the office in the Antelope Valley. And now you've transitioned to a deputy director overseeing three different offices in the Antelope Valley for the Service Bureau 3. And I imagine have a lot more oversight across what's going on in all of DCFS. So how do you think about the pilot that we did in the Antelope Valley being relevant to the rest of DCFS and the rest of the county?
Well, I think that one key takeaway was that the pilot really allowed us to adapt our practice and really think about some other work that we were also doing that was very trauma informed, but really stressing prevention. Our collaboration with community providers has only really grown from those opportunities that we had through this pilot. And I think also the pursuit of additional training. So one of the components that you heard earlier in the presentation today was about the training, which was also impacted by what was learned from the focus groups. I think even going back to the 2021 report and really looking at what other external trainings can be brought. And I'm really proud to share with everyone today that actually today is the last day of the first cohort of the Safe and Together model, which we have brought to DCFS. And over the course of the 6 cohorts, 240 social workers and supervisors in emergency response will be trained in that model. And so we're really looking forward to how that continues to support and improve our practice. And in addition, 6 trainers will be certified so that we can scale this department wide. So, and thank you for the hearts. We're really excited about this work. I also think that this really offered a blueprint for us to look at other opportunities to utilize our community partners and to collaborate with external stakeholders in how we can support domestic violence consultants in our offices and really teaming and working together. And so I think that the department is in a place of really recognizing the asset that this pilot brought to all of us. We also recognize that change is challenging and hard. And so as we kind of continue to explore our work moving forward, and again, really thinking about prevention and some of the other work you're going to hear today, I know from Dr. Hunter, we're really excited about how these will all interface and work together.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. You were such an integral partner when we did the pilot, and DCFS continues to be so collaborative and supportive as we seek to spread these changes across the department together. We really appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next, we will hear from a panel of speakers facilitated by Taylor. Our speakers include Izzy Swindler, Chief of Staff, representing Assemblymember Tom Lackey, Lizzie Schuster, Senior Youth and Community Wellbeing Welfare Deputy, representing Supervisor Lindsay Horvath, and Monica Bankin, Children and Family Services and Economic and Workforce Development Deputy, representing Supervisor Catherine Barger.
Thank you so much, Chris. So hi, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion with the staff representing so many wonderful electeds. There have been a lot of changes in the policy and legislative space concerning child welfare and domestic violence. Having just explored the pilot in the Antelope Valley, we'll start by talking a bit about AB 779, and we'll turn first to Izzy with Assemblymember Tom Lackey's office. We really want to thank you for being here today. Can you please start by telling us a bit about your office's interest in domestic violence?
Yeah, hi everybody. Hope everyone's having a good day. The Assemblyman he's been in the building for now he's entering into his last year, entering into his 12th year. And throughout his term in the legislature, child abuse and domestic violence have been the forefront of his passions. The intersection with developmental and physical disabilities. There's a whole intersection there that the Assemblyman deeply and profoundly cares about. Most notably, unfortunately, our district is, we've been talking about this whole webinar represents Antelope Valley and a few other regions, and we have the highest rate of child abuse in the state, in our district. And notably and famously, the Gabriel Fernandez story, Noah Quattro, several of these young kids. And as a result of the Assemblyman's background and his prior career in CHP and seeing these things up close, and then to see them happen in his district, since day one of being elected, he's been very engaged on the subject and actively legislating in this space for many years.
Thank you so much. And we were grateful to have your office represented in October of last year, 2024, excuse me, when we presented our study findings in the Antelope Valley. And after attending that event, your office introduced AB 779. Can you tell us about that bill and what it does?
Yeah, so essentially everything you guys have heard today is to model that across the state. So essentially, it is putting domestic violence consultants into in access to social workers in order to expand knowledge and care and grow and protect. Um, so we pursued this path through the legislature. It actually was only supposed to be, and Taylor Dudley and the rest of her team were wonderful help through this whole bills process. I just want to give a shout out to them. But actually started out to be an LA County pilot. We had reached out to DCFS. Um, we've worked with them over the years many of times, and we reached out in the fall and asked, how can we help? What can we do? This is something the Assemblyman's passionate about. And they had actually pointed us, and our office had been there, to the study. And that's how this came to be, is to replicate that for LA County. And then through the legislative process, it actually got expanded to a statewide program. So that was a really wonderful benefit um, that we got to, as a result of funding and a variety of things, we had kept it just to LA in order to see this bill to the governor's desk. Because unfortunately, while all of us in this call feel strongly and passionate on this issue, um, budget constraints are budget constraints. So we had to keep the bill limited to LA County as a result to try and get it to the governor's desk. And we got immensely lucky and we got to make it available statewide.
Thank you so much. Yes, we were honored to introduce the research that supported the eventual bill and then its passage. We're excited for other jurisdictions to perhaps explore how they too, excuse me, could introduce a domestic violence consultant to their child welfare services process.
Absolutely.
And really appreciate your boss's leadership in that regard. Can you tell us what Assemblymember Lackey might take on next in this area of legislation? Do you think, for instance, that he might try to build on AB 779?
So we would love to. We are, as I mentioned previously, the Assemblyman's in his last year. So unfortunately, his what he'll be able to do is limited to this year. We would actually long term, and something his staff and I have communicated and talked to when we go to other offices, is in honor of his work, wanting to continue and potentially get state funding for the AB 779 in this program to help create incentives for more counties to be able to have the resources to take this on. So that's something, unfortunately, outside of the Assemblyman, that we will be looking to do in the coming years, but we are in a significant budget deficit. So this was unfortunately not the year where that could be a possibility. But in addition, for this year, for the Assemblyman, he is looking, for the last several years, has done a variation of what he calls Gabriel's Law in reference to Gabriel Fernandez that I brought up earlier. And we are in the stage of introduction and language crafting right now. So we are working on that specific area. So in the coming weeks, we will be introducing I don't want to give any details because things can change between now and then, but you guys will be seeing, and I'll make sure that your team is updated and happy to send it out to anyone else that's interested of what it finally comes out to be, to keep working in this space to protect children as well as their parents.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, we can appreciate that the budgetary issues are difficult at this time, but nevertheless, appreciate your boss's leadership and advancing this issue across the state. So thank you so much, Izzy. Appreciate you being here today.
Of course.
We are now going to move to Monica, representing Supervisor Barger today. Thank you, Monica, for being here. Your office was also involved with our work in the Antelope Valley. Can you elaborate on the supervisor's interest in domestic violence and child welfare issues, especially as related to the Antelope Valley?
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. And definitely thanks to our legislative colleagues at Assemblyman Lackey's office, always has been a wonderful partner for us representing the needs of the North County. So thanks to them. I'm going to go back a little bit in time, and this was in 1980 when Supervisor Antonovich, who was the supervisor then representing Antelope Valley in the North County, convened a task force to assess services for survivors of domestic violence. And that led to the incorporation of Valley Oasis in 1981 as the AV Domestic Violence Council. Since then, I know our office has been very supportive financially of this organization. They do wonderful work. And unfortunately, are actually, like, always need more capacity, et cetera, because of the great needs in the community. Of course, we are aware of the variety of high-profile child fatality cases that have happened in the Antelope Valley, and that's been something that the supervisor has been working on since she was the children's deputy for Supervisor Antonovich, and that work has continued here.
Great. Thank you so much. So we were really grateful to Supervisor Barger for supporting the pilot and her interest in it. Can you talk more about that and why she joined the event and, really what her interest in the pilot is all about?
Yeah, thank you. As we know, survivors of domestic violence experience trauma and are frequently influenced by prior exposure to domestic violence. And that's something we just heard now today as well in this new research. Foster care is an essential intervention and is the role of the county in certain circumstances under state law. But at the same time, we must also prioritize the development and implementation of alternatives that support survivors of domestic violence and keep families together when safe. So that's why we were really happy to support this study and were there to speak about it. The supervisor was really honored to be invited to speak and kind of release this research with UCLA Pritzker. And then also, I do remember calls with Assemblyman Lackey's office on this pilot idea. The supervisor is always very supportive of how we can direct resources to the North County, which does have historic needs, high numbers of child welfare cases, low income rates, et cetera, and should be considered one of our greatest need communities in the LA County.
Thank you so much, Monica. Yes, we appreciate the tag teaming that happened essentially here with Supervisor Barger supporting the work happening in the Antelope Valley, and then Assemblyman Lackey coming in and helping spread the word about it across the state. Can you talk about any ideas that stand out to you from the pilot that might serve constituents across LA County?
Yeah, and thank you. The recommendations do call for additional reforms across LA County in a variety of ways, and that includes strengthening collaboration between child welfare and domestic violence service providers, refining referral and response protocols, and advancing organizational cultural change. Some of these are also things the supervisor has been working on through her motion on Antelope Valley social worker reforms over the last 6 years. And that did include working within the community of Antelope Valley to greater strengthen communities, workforce pathways into human services roles so that those who have lived experience, et cetera, are aware of and knowledgeable of careers of which they can directly help and support community members that are in similar situations. And I think we're also looking right now at like poverty alleviation issues. Of course, right now, given the county budget circumstances, we're definitely open to ideas, but cost neutrality is the key right now. But also supporting our Antelope Valley families, and the supervisor's always been a strong advocate for them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We are really grateful to you, Monica, and also to Supervisor Barger, of course, for her leadership Turning now to Lizzie from Supervisor Horvath's office. Welcome, Lizzie.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Supervisor Horvath has been a champion for survivors from her very first days in office as supervisor for the 3rd District. Can you tell us more about Supervisor Horvath's response to domestic violence and child welfare issues?
Sure. So more broadly, and I don't know if my slide is going to come up. Great. So the Supervisor Horvath, one of our big priorities is gender-based violence, and that work was prioritized by the whole Board of Supervisors in 2024. And you can see there the expanded definition of GBV that the board adopted, and they've also adopted a monthly cluster meeting focused on this work for policy deputies. And in addition to this, the board has identified ongoing funding to fully staff the GBV work, which is housed within the county's Office of Violence Prevention, and to fund the GBV prevention community grants, which are small dollar grants that are going out this year for the first time to 12 agencies to do work within community focused on GBV prevention. In terms of child welfare, our office has really prioritized improving incomes for our youngest kids in care. So those 0 to 5, advancing the Young Children in Care program that DCFS has to ensure that infants and toddlers receive trauma-informed, developmentally appropriate support. DCFS has included additional staff for this unit in their upcoming budget request and have plans to continue to increase staff annually. Together, these policy efforts get at prevention and supporting families experiencing DV in innovative ways with the goal of keeping families together. And then I just quickly, slightly different but related as it relates to GBV and gender-based violence, I just want to mention that the board has also advanced a public health model with a focus on prevention, community-based response, and equity rather than punitive actions to address human trafficking in the county. And that is for all types of human trafficking efforts, including our work to address commercially sexually exploited children. So I think that just shows, another example of the board's prioritizing investments in community and public health and thinking about how we can prevent people from coming into contact with our system.
Great. Thank you so much, Lizzie. Thinking more specifically about child welfare system, Supervisor Horvath has really prioritized mandatory reporting reform. How do you see the mandatory reporting reform fitting into what we're talking about today?
That's a great question. Thank you. And I will give my answer, but I know Dr. Tamara Hunter is going to be talking later, and she is leading the county's work in this space. So not to put you on the spot, Dr. Hunter, but I want to give you a shout out there. In 2023, as Taylor mentioned, Supervisor Horvath authored a motion, which was actually our first child welfare related motion, to advance a shift from mandated reporter to mandated supporter, recognizing that the current reporting system often surveils families, especially Black families, without actually improving safety. Mandatory reporting reform better supports survivors of domestic violence by reducing unnecessary child welfare involvement and prioritizing trauma-informed safety center responses. By shifting to this model, families experiencing DV are more likely to be connected to community-based services, including housing, rather than subjected to really invasive investigations that can escalate harm or deter others from seeking help. So it does all this while ensuring that child safety remains paramount and at the forefront.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you so much. We've been grateful to see some of the shifts happening. And again, I echo your shout out for Dr. Hunter and the work that she's doing in this space and look forward to hearing from her more in a bit. So, is there anything else you'd like to see the county start shifting towards or moving towards when it comes to survivors of domestic violence and child welfare system involvement?
Yes. Before I answer that question, I just want to lift up, I forgot to do this, another pilot that DCFS is doing that I just want to lift up for folks here. So in 2023, DCFS launched a pilot where they co-located DV experts at the Child Protection Hotline. And so it's similar to the AV pilot that we've been discussing, but a little bit different. And that pilot provides basically every DV referral generated by the hotline receives referral resources. So when the caseworker made the first door knock, they were able to provide a family with tailored resources related to DV. And it also allows DV experts to participate in the child and family team meetings to provide support and insight for DV. And they're collecting data to help identify DV hotspots in the county. And so we can use that data to think about where we can focus our efforts. And right now that pilot is funded through 2027, and they're looking into how we can continue that work. So I just want to lift up that work as well. But to answer your question, I think policy change calls for a coordinated, survivor-centered approach across child welfare and domestic violence that includes deepening partnerships between DCFS and trusted community-based providers, improving how DV cases are identified and routed at the hotline, which our pilot will hopefully continue to help with, and continuing culture change efforts that confront racial inequities and support the workforce. The county needs to invest in practical supports that help families heal and reunify. We need to fund reunification services that are DV informed. We keep hearing this all the time, but expanding safe emergency housing, reducing barriers, and increasing access to mental health care, child care, and accessible DV programming so that survivors and their children can remain safely together wherever possible. And while we're in a budget crisis right now, we need to continue to explore what funding can be made available to support this work, how we can leverage existing resources, and how we can get creative to ensure that survivors and their families have the support that they need. And this isn't a shift, but really an ask from me to all of you. I know the folks here are probably more of an expert in this area than I am, so would love to hear from you what you think the county should do. What policy changes do you think would help? Are there services and programs in your community that would be helpful for us to think about exploring in the county? So really, we are looking to you all to help inform the work going forward. And thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me to be here too.
Yes, thank you so much, Lizzie, and thank you for making yourself available to the input of our constituents and colleagues across LA County. Greatly appreciate your time today. With that, I'm going to turn it to Chris.
Thank you, Taylor. Many thanks again to Izzy, Monica, and Lizzie. We are now turning it to our panel of survivors and DV advocates. We are joined by Roman James, who serves as a commissioner representing Supervisor Horvath on the Commission for Children and Families. We're also joined by Jackie Herrera, a parent partner at Los Angeles Dependency Lawyers. In addition to that, we are joined by Allison Messenger, managing staff attorney at Genesee Center, and Yvette Lozano, Deputy Executive Director at Peace Over Violence. Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we're especially grateful and excited for this portion of our discussion today, hearing from survivors and from the organizations who work on the front lines and with survivors is critical to ensuring that this work goes forward with those voices amplified. A lot has been discussed today, and it's critical that survivor and advocate voices are heard in response. And so for the next portion of the discussion, we'll talk a bit about the report and your ideas about it. We'd also love to hear about what you feel has really advanced the field and the areas that are still in need of improvement. But before we get there, I'd love to start with Allison by asking you a bit about your role and how you came to this work.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this incredibly important conversation. I am Allison Messenger. I'm the managing staff attorney at Genesee Center. Genesee Center, for those who may not be familiar, is a domestic violence intervention and prevention program. We're based in South Los Angeles. I've been with Genesee Center since 2012. And prior to that, I was a deputy district attorney with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, where I handled several domestic violence cases. At Genesee, I'm responsible for overseeing several programs, but one is our in-house legal services program, where we provide direct legal services to our residential and drop-in clients in the areas of family law and immigration. I would say that my interest in the intersection of domestic violence and child welfare is a result of my work representing and supporting survivors who are involved with CPS and the dependency court system because of domestic violence. At Genesee Center, most of our clients are from communities of color, with 48% of our clients identifying as Black or African American and 40% identifying as Hispanic or Latin. And consistent with local, state, and national data, which shows that families of color are overrepresented in the child welfare system, particularly Black and African American families. Over 50% of our clients enter our shelter programs with active CPS or dependency court involvement. And in working with these families, overwhelmingly, our clients report that child welfare involvement with their family did not make them or their children safer. It complicated and in some cases hindered their efforts to escape the violence. And often as a result of victim blaming, family separation, and lack of trauma-informed support, their experience and their children's experience was psychologically and emotionally devastating. And what I've always found cruelly ironic is that in most cases, our clients' involvement with the child welfare system is a direct result of them reaching out for help in escaping the abuse, which leads to extreme institutional betrayal and mistrust and deters our clients in terms of their willingness to engage with systems that are meant to help and support them. And I think this exposes the need for mandatory reporting reform. And so all of these experiences working with survivors has informed my interest in this topic in terms of the intersection of domestic violence, child welfare, and mandated reporting reform. And I've been following efforts to affect this for a number of years.
Wonderful. Allison, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Turning to Jackie. Jacqueline, thank you so much for being with us. And a special gratitude to Jacqueline, having worked with us now for the last 5 years on these efforts at the UCLA Pritzker Center. Really grateful to have you here today. Can you tell us a bit about your role and how you came to this work?
Good afternoon. It's always an honor to be part of a panel, and it's just coming together, working and bringing such amazing work. It's always inspiring. I currently work as a peer advocate at Los Angeles Dependency Lawyers. I work for the Hope Line, which is a pre-petition service, a preventative service that works with clients that are currently under investigation with DCFS. I work with assisting clients, such as preparing them to communicate with social workers, setting up the appointments to contact the social workers. Sometimes some of the clients could be resistant to that. I also contact the social workers with the intent to work together as a collaborative team. They were mentioning, we're here to work together. We have the same goal, and it's working more into the mandate supporting instead of the mandate reporting. I offer my service to help the social work and enrolling clients, helping the clients find resources to enroll into parenting, individual counseling, DV awareness, anything in that area to benefit a family to overcome these barriers and potentially avoid a open petition. So that's what I do as a peer advocate. My interest in coming into this role is mainly because I'm a former client. I had an open case back in 2017. It closed 2018. It was a failure to protect domestic violence case. When I heard the term that the social worker told me, oh, it's a failure to protect. I was a little bit offended because I felt that I was being protective and was doing whatever I was able to do as a mother to protect my children. And, going from making that call, my call came from a mandated reporter, which is law enforcement, um, to asking for help and saying, "Oh, I'm going to be safe." Finally, I had the courage to make this phone call to find out I was going to have an open case. I went from having a home to being and homeless into a shelter and starting from the bottom to I think that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was doing all these services. Not to mention back in 2018, everything was in person. We didn't have the privilege of having everything via Zoom. So having to manage all this and trying to prove myself that I have been protective and just moving forward and finding stability for my family was something that now it just interests me, and I just want to be a voice for people that are going through the same process and letting them know that it's going to be okay. We all have setbacks, but we move forward and there is help out there. So that's part of why I'm here.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you so much for your courage and for always sharing so openly with our community. Let's go to Roman. Roman, thanks for being here. Can you tell us a bit about your role and how you came to this work?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Brenda, for referring me, Dr. Brenda Tully, for referring me to this panel. And thank you, Taylor, for inviting me. I'm sorry, I have been having issues with my computer, so things may not quite sync up with my visual and my sound. So I want to let you know that ahead of time. I am a survivor, and my survivorship does not look like most survivors in the community. And Allison Messenger, who has been a staunch supporter of mine, she knows that well because Genesee Center is actually one of the agencies that I have sought help from and have had robust representation from. I am a survivor of post-separation abuse via coercive control and perpetuated through family court, DCFS, LAPD, anything, and also DPSS, anything that the abuser could find to weaponize against me, he has done. And so I became a unwitting organizer by organizing multiple mothers to file a complaint against a judge. And I was successful in the sense that the judge was removed from family court. She was then placed in probate, where she became a menace to society there. And she has now been retired. And I believe that was as a result of continuing ongoing misconduct. That said, through my work in terms of organizing and activism regarding family court, I basically launched into the DBC as a survivor, hoping to bring, a tangible and coherent and cogent voice to what survivors are experiencing beyond what the agencies seemingly at that time were limited to believing was our experiences. Mostly that, abuse was happening in the home and it was specifically, one form, and just trying to raise awareness about coercive control and post-separation abuse and institutional betrayal. I am an abolitionist of child welfare. I came to that belief through my reading and study because, the thing about survivors who are experiencing family court is that we are actively trying to understand what we're experiencing in the upside down. And for those of you who watch Stranger Things, you will understand that metaphor. But family court is like it's like a capsule. It is working in contrast to other systems. And so I was recruited to my role as a commissioner. There were people who sought me out in the third district because they knew that I had been doing this work previous to my time there. I've been with the commission now, I believe, 2 years. And, they knew about the work that I had been doing in the community, specifically with relation to the Domestic Violence Council. I serve as the co-chair for the DV LEAP, which is the Lived Experience Advisory Peer Group. I am the co-chair of the Commission's Racial Justice Committee, and I also serve as a community partner with the Office of Violence Prevention's Community Partnership Council. So I cover a lot of areas, and I don't want to be a wet blanket, but I think the county does not do enough cross-sector collaboration. I think there should be more overlap with systems working together because they are very siloed. And I think that there needs to be more of a consideration of what's happening in the court system. Everybody seems to be daunted by challenging the judiciary. And I don't know why. I've challenged it and, I was successful. And so my thought is if we're not talking about the courts, we're not doing the work because the courts are literally undermining efforts that systems and organizations like UCLA Pritzker are doing. And I would really like to see more of an effort to engage the courts, make sure that the judges are showing up and understanding the roles, the activism, the policy changes that are happening, because they seem to want to insulate themselves. And we're seeing this, all the way up through the Supreme Court, from what the community deserves, desires, and has asked for. And so I would love to see more of that kind of work being done.
Thank you so
That's
much,
my
Roman.
story.
Thank you for sharing your perspective and your role, and I'm excited for additional conversation about the report. We'll turn now to Yvette. Yvette, please tell us a bit about your role and how you came to this work.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jacqueline and Roman, for sharing your story. It's so amazing to have you here. Yes, my name's Yvette Lozano. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at Peace Over Violence. We are a community-based prevention youth organization providing crisis intervention services, advocacy, emergency response, and long-term support for survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse in Los Angeles County. I came to this work through direct services and community advocacy as well, working closely with survivors as they navigated violence in their homes, and also navigating the complex systems such as the law enforcement, child welfare, and the courts. Hearing survivors' voices describe both the support they were getting and the harm that these systems has shaped my commitment to this work, and a commitment to survivors, and my commitment to a collaborative response. I've been with the organization for 25 years. I oversee all the direct services at Peace Over Violence. Another area is that we are also a training organization, and as a lead trainer on domestic violence to other service providers. I want to just reference that about 10 years ago, Peace for Violence received funding through Van Nuys Charity to train DCFS staff and other home visitors on the dynamics of domestic violence. And that early investment, I feel, helped build the foundation. And it's so meaningful to me to see and hear all of these stories and all of this collaboration and this movement that it's now evolving. So I want to thank you for having me here, and I look forward to the continued conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yvette. And yes, so many of the DV organizations, Peace Over Violence, Genesee Center, many others have just been at this forefront of this work for so long. And the effects of your work are felt, and we appreciate you being here with us today to tell us more about that. Let's talk a little bit about the report. Brenda talked about the findings within DCFS around perspectives and perceptions pertaining to domestic violence within DCFS. We heard about the Antelope Valley study and how those findings are felt across all of LA County in terms of need and in terms of change. And so would love any thoughts or perspectives that our panel has on the report and some of the insights shared. And we can start with, why don't we start with Yvette? We'll go back around.
Yes, thank you. So I reading the report, and I mean, what came to mind for me was it just affirmed what survivors and advocates have long known and have been saying. If families can be safer when responses to domestic violence are grounded in collaboration, in trust, and in meaningful access to resources, like many of the organizations that you mentioned, and that it doesn't come from a place of not punishing and not blaming victims for not doing something that they couldn't do. And the report also really recognizes and gives recognition to the coercive control, the secondary trauma that survivors experience when they are reaching for support or services, and the unintended consequences of systems involvement. It's especially important that, we see that. Uh, it reflects a growing understanding that these systems must avoid replicating the power and control dynamics that survivors are trying to escape from their own home, and not experiencing that through these entities that are supposed to be there to help them. I also appreciate the report's acknowledgement of the DCFS progress that has been done, having training, having additional collaboration, specifically in the Antelope Valley, is an area that I really want to acknowledge. In domestic violence, we want to make sure that we're connecting and we're working in collaboration and doing cross referrals. This really demonstrates DCFS's commitment to learning and partnering with outside resources, like many of the domestic violence agencies that are here. So I want to definitely acknowledge your work and thank you for bringing this forward. But I also want to acknowledge the work of the many survivors who have gone through this experience, and like Roman's experience, and just voicing and being so courageous to bring this forward and for us to be discussing it right now.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Roman, any thoughts on the report? Maybe, well,
Okay, sorry,
I know the tech.
it took me,
That's okay.
my computer. So I loved the report because I felt like it was very affirming. I worked with the DVC on the child welfare DV maltreatment committee back in, I think it started in 2021. And then, the result, I was working in the committee because there was like training, policy, and one other group. And so I was working with training because one of the things that we've long been told is that there needs to be more training of judges, of social workers with relation to DV. And so I felt that the report was extremely affirming of what, you know, people with boots on the ground already know that seemingly hadn't filtered up to the agency or management levels of these institutions. And so I was also a co-founder of the International Coercive Control Conference, which was a virtual conference that ran in 2023. So I've had contact with experts literally all over the world, the foremost journalists, researchers, lawyers, advocates around the world. And, there's a pattern to this work. And one of the things that is great to see I believe, in wake of George Floyd, is that we are now not able to unsee what has always existed. And so there are people who are actively working to, you know, create change, dynamic change, robust change. And so I'm extremely excited because I think without folks like you guys, we really can't quantify or qualify the experiences of what's happening within communities, because oftentimes survivors are too traumatized to really convey in a way that syncs up with how, attorneys and social workers are able to see it, because they're experiencing vicarious trauma as well. And so, I'm super excited that we are starting to see this kind of work come to the surface. And I hope that the county does a better job of disseminating this information and making sure that the right people who need to know about what's truly happening within the community receive the information. That's my request, is that we make sure that the right people get this information and get access to it, and integrate it into the work that they're doing daily.
Thank you, Roman. Yes, that's our hope too, right? Getting it out there. That's why we do events like today, and why we're grateful for everyone being here to help amplify these changes, draw attention to them, and then keep making more change that we know is necessary. So thank you so much for your feedback. Could we go to Jackie?
Hey, I just wanted to go back to what Yvette mentioned, that a lot, the report was great, so much knowledge, so much information, but the real feedback from survivors, and a lot of the survivors, we sometimes feel like we are punished for example, the failure to protect allegation. So just going back to, in the report, actually talking to survivors and getting this information from real people, it makes such a difference in the line of work that we do. Just moving forward into solutions to what the future has for us. And I feel like a lot of the things that have changed are more service providers are offering. We have attorneys now that are working in this type of work. We have case managers, peer advocates, and everybody brings some sort of knowledge, and it's just amazing how everybody just works together.
Yeah, Jackie, thank you so much for touching on the hotline that you're working at and some of the changes there. We, that wasn't something that we were even able to write about 5 years ago. And so really seeing the evolution and how it's helped so many survivors and families has really been impactful. And we really love, especially that you're there and lending your voice to that space. So thank you for your feedback. Why don't we go to Allison for any thoughts on the report?
Thank you, Taylor. I really enjoyed reading the report and was incredibly encouraged by the findings. I appreciated that the findings and the data was delineated from both a survivor and a DCFS administrator perspective. I found the data and the information gleaned from the survivor participants to be quite affirming in terms of what we experience anecdotally working with survivors here at Genesee Center. And frankly, the information in the report is very consistent with what our clients tell us about their experiences with the child welfare system, some of which I've already discussed in my earlier comments. I will say that I was incredibly encouraged by it, to echo Yvette's sentiments, encouraged by the acknowledgement and the recognition of the importance of cross-sector collaboration in terms of addressing the issue of domestic violence and the intersection of domestic violence with the child welfare system. I was encouraged to see an openness for more training around domestic violence and a recognition that continued policy and practice changes are needed, and that there is a willingness and an openness to adapt those and to do that in a really collaborative way, which ultimately I think is what's needed in order to affect meaningful reform and change when it comes to this issue of domestic violence and child welfare. So for me, I was very encouraged and excited by the report and in terms of how it can inform our work moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Allison. It's been great to hear from the group about both the changes that have been made, as well as the changes that still need to be made. And I'm hoping that with our remaining time, we can double down on emphasizing or discussing among the group any changes that you feel have advanced the field or any areas that are still in need of improvement. And we can start with Roman.
Hi, thank you. I raised my hand because I wasn't for sure if we were going to move on, but I really just want to emphasize domestic violence. You know, when I first came to the DVC, I was prompted by my amazing, now deceased therapist, Kendall Evans, who was just such a light in the DV field, not only in LA County, but throughout the state. And I just, you know, we have long heard that domestic violence is a public health crisis. And when I would ask leadership, like, what are the tangible policies that are in place that are helping to disrupt, no one could point it to me. No one could point it out. And, you know, we saw with COVID that there were tangible guidelines like staying 6 feet apart, wearing a mask in public, not congregating in large groups, but we could not point out specific, tangible guidelines for how we should address DV within our community. And so beyond education, you know, we should be talking about, or I should say beyond training, we should be talking about education of our youth, because teen dating violence is rising. And we're going to see more of that with the political climate. You know, I think people just sort of keep the blinders on and they remain within their silos and their positions, and they don't want to explore and be curious, you know, beyond what they know. And I think we should really be acknowledging the changing political climate and then the adversity, the adverse impact that that's going to impart on our youth, on domestic violence currently as it is exists, and on our court systems, because I'm always pushing for more transparency around the courts, especially family court. So I think if we could really create tangible public health centered guidelines and start educating our youth about domestic abuse, because I like to use that term instead of violence, because it makes space for all of the other forms of violence in the form of emotional, you know, verbal, psychological. I just really hope that we can start creating within the county some tangible guidelines that people in the community can point to, and that the county does a better job of disseminating that information.
Wonderful. Roman, thank you so much. Any other thoughts or feedback on areas that need advancement or things that have been improved from the group? Roman did such a great job of talking about zooming out and really thinking about this from a public health perspective. Allison?
Thank you, Taylor. While I'm very excited and supportive of efforts to improve cross-sector, collaboration amongst service providers, the child welfare system, to improve the experience of families referred into the child welfare system because of domestic violence, I really am a proponent of early intervention and changes that result in fewer families being referred into the child welfare system to begin with. So when I think about key changes in this area that are meaningful and exciting for me, one of them has to be the passage of AB 2085, which limits the definition of general neglect to only include circumstances where a child is at substantial risk of suffering serious physical harm or illness, and clarifies that a parent's economic status should not trigger a general neglect mandated report. Why this is significant, and I don't think the significance of it can be overstated, is because general neglect has been and continues to be the largest child abuse reporting category. And sometimes families experiencing DV are referred to CPS under this category of abuse. And this narrowing and refinement of the general neglect definition, I think, will reduce the number of families, including families experiencing DV, swept into the child welfare system to begin with. I think it's going to result in a reduction of the surveillance of families who are experiencing poverty. And ultimately, it will address racial disparities in the child welfare system by ensuring that families aren't necessarily brought to the attention of the child welfare system by revising the standards of mandated reporting as it pertains to general neglect. And I want to just point out another really positive outgrowth of AB 2085's passage has been the AB 2085 task force, which has really worked hard to develop and identify a number of recommendations and implementation targets, many of which align with the mandated reporting to community supporting task force recommendations. And it's exciting to see some of those recommendations starting to actually be implemented. Just this past summer, we had Senate Bill 119 passed, which requires the California Department of Social Services to implement a mandated reporting advisory committee. Actually, this committee already exists, but now with SB 119, that committee's work is codified and will continue, which ensures continued transformation from mandated reporting to community supporting, and that disparities in the child welfare system will be eliminated. And as a proponent of early intervention, I think one of the things that most excites me about AB 2085's passage is that I think it will position us to now address the failure to protect category of reporting, which is most often cited when families are referred into the child welfare system because of domestic violence. So I think we are on the precipice of being able to make really meaningful change and reform that will positively impact families experiencing domestic violence.
Thank you so much, Allison, and thank you for elevating AB 2085. It's, mandatory reporting reform has been raised a few times today, and I think we're going to hear a bit more about it because it does stand to make such a difference. Before we move on to our next panel in just a minute, I wanted to give both Yvette and Jackie an opportunity to share any brief closing thoughts.
Yeah, I would like to. I just want to acknowledge, Roman, thank you so much for bringing up the prevention aspect. I totally agree. That's something that we really need to consider. In our role, or my role at Peace or Violence, in closing, our role is to work alongside survivors and partner across that are helping them across different systems. And so we need to continue to invest in culturally responsive services. We need to figure out our housing situation for survivors, what type of economic supports, and all these cross-systems collaborations are key. They're critical and vital to the work that we do, but they're vital and critical to the survivors to start their healing process. And this includes law enforcement, This includes child welfare. This includes the prosecutor's offices as well, and the courts. This is essential. And so I am very grateful for being here. And I just want to say that by centering survivors' voices and learning together, we can build responses grounded in healing with dignity and long-term well-being. And I appreciate that the voices of survivors were included in this report and they were included in this conversation. So thank you.
Yvette, thank you. And thank you for specifically raising law enforcement and the courts as areas of reform. We can't emphasize that enough. I know Roman raised the courts as well. And this is, of course, an area of ongoing need and an ongoing attention. So thank you. Jackie, any closing thoughts?
I know we're out of time, but I just wanted to, just how I think it was Yvette was saying, just working as a team, collaboration is so important. Don't be afraid to have contact with other services because we are here for the families and we all aim for the same thing, which is keeping families together and moving forward.
Yes. Thank you, Jackie. And once again, we will include the Hope Line contact information as a follow-up resource for any of you who are interested. It does stand to be a huge opportunity for getting support when experiencing domestic violence in the midst of a child welfare investigation. So thank you, Jackie, and thank you for being with us all this time.
Thank you for having me.
I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you to the four of you for your insights and time and for being in community with us today. What an incredibly powerful discussion. Can we all applaud these insights through like virtual hands and thank them for their courage in sharing their stories and their views today? For our last session, we will turn to Krista Colon, Executive Director at the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence, Dr. Tamara Hunter, Division Chief, Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services, Sharon Balmer Cartagena, Directing Attorney for Child, Youth, and Family Advocacy at Public Counsel, and Dr. Christina Lovato, Assistant Professor of Social Welfare at the University of California at Berkeley. One second. Where she also serves as a director of the Center on Immigration and Child Welfare Initiative. Thank you.
Chris, thank you so much. Thank you to our panel for joining us today. A lot has been said about the changes that have been made relating to both domestic violence and child welfare, but we all know there is so much more to do. We will start with Krista and explore some potential legislative next steps to address issues at the intersection of domestic violence and child welfare. Krista, I'm turning it to you.
Thank you so much, Taylor, and just so much appreciation for the report and the work, and for the panelists who have come already today to share so much. I really want to appreciate the discussion we've heard throughout about mandated reporting reform. We believe really strongly this is an area that continues to need attention. And as usual, Allison has said it better than I could, so I won't even try to replicate, her remarks about AB 2085, a focus on failure to protect, and the work that can happen as well at the county level. And, I think LA always has such a powerful opportunity where leadership in this area can help build momentum for statewide change. For the partnership, we are not running a specific piece of legislation around the child welfare system this year. One of the things we are working on, though, is continuing to focus on data collection, looking to see what data is available at the state level, analyzing that to see what it can tell us about how these issues play out statewide and help inform state level policy change. For us, legislative education continues to be an important issue. I'm so glad that Izzy was here to speak about Assemblymember Lackey's work and the work that has been successful in the legislature. But we know that every time we bring up issues related to the child welfare system and protecting children from harm and abuse, that it can raise questions and tensions. And so educating about the intersection with domestic violence and child welfare is incredibly important, and reports like this are so beneficial. So I wanted to share very briefly about the broader policy agenda that partnership continues to pursue and some of the ways that that uplifts issues that are highlighted in the report and intersects with the work focused on the child welfare system. So first and foremost, I want to name prevention. And Roman, I'm so grateful to you for sharing your personal experience and also for referencing the importance of educating youth, addressing teen dating abuse, and building a generation that has the skills for healthy relationships. So we are committed to working to establish state funding for prevention and focus on preventing violence before it occurs. I thought it was also really notable here that the report highlights the generational trauma and cycles of system involvement and experiences with domestic violence. We know that interrupting this cycle can have amazing ripple effects for our families and communities. I think it was also notable throughout the report that there was a focus on the importance of collaboration and also the challenges because domestic violence programs are often stretched. Shelters are full, services have waits, and the staffing and resources are limited. And one of the partnership's core focus areas has been to backfill declines in federal funding that underpins so much of the response to victims of crime here in California, and especially including domestic violence services. And so continuing to advocate for state funding to shore up domestic violence housing responses, domestic violence legal services, which again have been noted so importantly here, and also continued work on economic justice and housing issues more broadly. We also, as folks have talked about the role of the courts, the partnership will be working this year on addressing the issue of litigation abuse, where abusive partners often bring a survivor back into court time and time again, can have devastating impacts financially and otherwise for survivors. And, I think it was telling that limited access to legal services, especially for complex cases, was highlighted in the report. These are some of the cases we see continually coming back into courts with really negative impacts for survivors. And then I know other of my panelists here will speak in particular about the needs of immigrant survivors, but I want to just name that one issue we are working on this year is increasing access to remote court appearances, recognizing that in this moment of increased immigration enforcement and ICE presence and activity in our communities, that survivors may be fearful of coming into our courtrooms. So increasing remote appearance access for their safety and well-being. And all of this work that we're working on, I just want to name, is in a moment where we are seeing, even here at the state level, an increased focus on criminalization and punitive responses, right? We have fielded at the partnership increased calls for strengthening criminal punishment for domestic violence, creating registries, GPS tracking, really this sort of pendulum swing back towards a focus on criminalization. And so we know it's important to continue to elevate the ways that the criminal system and some of our punitive systems can really harm survivors as well. So that continues to be at the forefront. Work.
Yes.
And Taylor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Krista. Thank you for the partnership leadership and collaboration. We truly appreciate it. We will turn it now to Dr. Tamara Hunter. Dr. Hunter will talk with us a bit about some of the prevention-related reforms that she is working on at DCFS. Thank you, Dr. Hunter.
Good afternoon. Am I sharing my screen?
Yes,
All
thank you.
right. Okay, thank you. Again, I am Tamara Hunter, and I lead LA County's mandated supporting initiative, which is our effort to reform mandatory reporting of suspected child abuse and neglect. And I also lead the county's implementation of the Family First Prevention Services Act or Prevention Services Program in California. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. I just want to begin by saying that I am truly honored to be a part of this event and to uplift the UCLA Center, Pritzker Center's leadership in this space. So, really grateful to be here and for your partnership. As has been the recurring theme during this event, mandated reporting in its current iteration is a root cause of the problem that so many families face. It is a deeply flawed, misguided, and incredibly harmful policy response to our responsibility as a society to ensure that children are safe. This slide that you see, which I don't have time to overview now, lifts up some of the many, many reasons for reform of this policy. History will rightfully judge us harshly for mandatory reporting of suspected child abuse and neglect and our response to domestic violence, despite everything that we know about it, is particularly damning. The Mandated Supporting Initiative, or the MSI, here in LA County is striving to be a part of the solution. The MSI was born in our county's Commission on Children and Families, and it was truly propelled into what it is today when it was the subject, I'll say, of a very courageous board motion that Lizzie spoke about earlier that was introduced by Supervisor Horvath and unanimously passed by our county's Board of Supervisors in 2023. The MSI is a broad coalition of stakeholders, many of whom you've heard from today, mandated reporters, partners with lived experience, advocates, systems leaders, you name it, a broad coalition of partners who are working to transform mandated reporting here in LA County. And we are having an impact across the state of California and truly across the nation. And our work is centered around four key pillars. And the first is improving the training the training that mandated reporters receive and their decision making. And we're striving to improve those through the use of well-designed decision support tools and through the provision of training that provides concrete guidance and support and is not fear-based and coercive for mandated reporters. Our comprehensive mandated reporter training, which is steeped in our reform philosophy, will be released this spring. The second pillar of our work is building pathways to preventive services and supports that are local in communities where families reside. And this pathway has to be as easy as it is for a mandated reporter to pick up the phone and make a report to the Child Protection Hotline. So we have to build a pathway that goes right to the door of a mandated reporter to that community-based infrastructure of preventive resources. And of course, we have to build and bolster that infrastructure in communities. Our third pillar involves rectifying flawed law and organizational policy. So much of what is wrong with mandated reporting is codified in problematic law and then reinforced by problematic organizational policy. And the final pillar of our work is arguably the most important, and that is narrative change. And that is interwoven through absolutely everything that we do. And in this regard, narrative change, it really means shifting those stories that we tell, that we believe, that we hear about mandated reporting, about why we have to continue doing this when we know the harm that it causes, and when we know that there are more effective ways to support families and to keep children safe. Yet we persist. And the reason that we persist is in large part due to the narratives to which we subscribe. So narrative change is an incredibly important part of the reform work here in LA County. And so, in my last slide and my final moments with you, I want to add to the list of advocacy opportunities that you all heard about today. So, as I mentioned, I'm leading LA County's implementation of the Family First Prevention Services Act. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with FFPSA, or here in California, FFPS, it is a law that was signed into, it went into effect in 2018, a national law, federal law that went into effect in 2018. And for the first time ever, it allows for federal Title IV-E funding, and that is the funding that is primarily used for foster care. For the first time ever, it allows for that funding to be used to fund services to prevent child welfare system involvement and foster care placement. FFPS funds evidence-based practices that address issues that drive families into contact with the child welfare system in three areas: issues related to mental health, issues related to substance abuse, and issues related to inadequate parenting skills. And I am sure that it is not lost on this group that domestic violence is missing from this list. And for that reason and many others, I have to say that FFPSA is by no means a prevention panacea, but it is most certainly a victory, and one that we should celebrate and strive to expand. FFPS is a victory because it makes available sustainable funding for prevention. And importantly, FFPS is helping to shift our mental models and shift those narratives about the options that we have at our disposal for keeping children safe that do not require child welfare system involvement. Evidence-based practices that are eligible for FFPSA funding must be included in the Title IV-E Prevention Services Clearinghouse. Currently, there are no standalone domestic violence programs in this clearinghouse. However, some of the models that are there, that are approved, are rated successful for addressing domestic violence. So I think one of the first opportunities that we have is to do a better job of making some of those programs that are effective in addressing DV available more widely, and elevating these models as options for mandated reporters where appropriate. And then the last opportunity that I'll lift up as I close out with this national audience is the opportunity to advocate and to find a way to get domestic violence focused evidence-based practices into the clearinghouse so that they can be eligible for FFPSA funding. And so in closing, this slide shares my contact information. You can sign up to join our listserv and to access our tools and be in the know about all things MSI in LA County, and hopefully become a part of our coalition. Thank you so much.
Dr. Hunter, thank you so much for being with us today. Your work is changing lives, and we're very grateful that you joined us and shared all that you're doing with our community. Thank you so much. We are running a few minutes behind, but I do want to make sure that Sharon from Public Counsel gets her presentation time, and then importantly, that Christina from Berkeley gets her presentation time, because she will be talking about some of the most pressing issues of our time, immigration. And so we want to give that time to both Sharon and to Christina. I'm sure you can all agree that these are important issues that we're dealing with, and they deserve the time. So Sharon, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thanks. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about a critical but sometimes overlooked component of the service array that survivors need, and that's legal advocacy. And legal advocacy at the start of a case, not once a case has already been filed in children's or dependency court. So survivors may need assistance obtaining restraining orders, navigating custody and visitation in family court, helping prevent an eviction, advocacy around government benefits or employment law. There's just so many legal issues that can trip a family up and have a survivor destabilized and pushed towards the front door of child welfare. Survivors may also need representation in a child welfare investigation itself. Most folks aren't assigned counsel until they're at court and have been separated from their children. But it is so helpful to have that representation when you're first interacting with the folks that are investigating you and making a determination about whether to separate a family. And folks need representation there to make sure their rights are respected, their voice is heard, and that all of these county policies that we've heard about that are improvements are followed, right? And so that the workers know about the policies and families can say, hey, in your policy it says this. This is what you should be doing. This is what I think. We've also lately been working with survivors who may be impacted by deportation and helping them to both make a plan that could avoid entry into the child welfare system if they are removed from the United States, and also avoid a guardianship if their plan is for reunification in the long term. LA County, I'm proud to say, has been at the forefront of providing these critical legal services to families. The Keeping Families Together project, which is a partnership between LA County, Shields for Families, and the legal services providers, Survivor Justice Center, Neighborhood Legal Services of LA, Public Counsel where I work, Inner City Law Center, the Los Angeles Dependency Lawyers, and yet one more, the Children's Law Center. So there's a large group of us, and that's good because LA is a big county, right? We launched this pilot project last year at the Vermont Corridor Office. Over the last about 8 months, we've seen spectacular results. Children are able to stay together with their families. Folks feel heard. We've only had a handful of petitions filed as a result of folks getting both social service and legal services braided together at the front. We're excited to say that this project is expanding this spring to all of the SPA 6 offices, and we'll be going under a robust evaluation process to see where we can grow, what's working, and what's not, with the hope to eventually expand this countywide if there is sufficient funding, because we found that it works. Right? It works to have lawyers and social workers and families work together to partner to resolve issues on a family-specific, individualized needs basis to figure out what we can do to keep children and families safe and together. The most critical thing that I think I found out over the last year looking at this project, looking at the data, was the stories of individual families. Families that said that access to counsel during the investigation phase left them feeling more confident and more empowered. They understood what was happening. They understood where they could push back and the ramifications of pushing back. They understood what was going to happen next. And they knew what they had to do to avoid going to dependency court and getting assigned counsel there. And so all of the things we've learned, I really can't speak highly enough about thinking about legal service and thinking about how legal services can be invested and embedded with other services so that folks have access to counsel right at the start and don't have to wait until their children are removed to first talk to a lawyer.
Sharon, thank you so much. You've been at the helm of so much important legal work. And as always, so grateful to Public Counsel for its leadership and advocacy, serving so many families in need. Thank you. Thank you. Lastly, we will turn to our friend, Dr. Christina Lovato. Immigration issues are presenting new and different challenges for families also experiencing domestic violence and child welfare system involvement. Can you please tell us what you're seeing and how advocates and organizations might respond at this time? Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for the invitation, and thank you for everyone's contribution today. I actually have some slides, and I think they were going to be, yes, excellent. We'll go ahead to the next slide, please. So first, I'd like to just briefly introduce the Center on Immigration and Child Welfare. It's an amazing resource that I direct at the School of Social Welfare at UC Berkeley. Our mission is to improve programs and policies related to immigrant children and families who are at the intersections of public child welfare and immigration enforcement. We produce original research, we develop resource development, policy reports, peer-reviewed publications, and we also provide technical trainings and national leadership around conference and symposia. We'll go ahead to the next slide, please. In terms of what we're seeing today, we know that just recently DHS reported that over 500,000 individuals in the US have been deported in just the year of 2025. We've seen an increase in concerns facing immigrants. We've seen limitations on protections, which I'll share in a moment. I'd also like to provide a brief overview of the Violence Against Women Act and how that pertains to immigrant individuals. And we'll take a brief look at practice implications. Next slide, please. So, what are the key issues facing immigrant parents at risk of domestic violence and child welfare involvement? We can go on to the next slide. A number of things. First of all, the increase of fear due to the ramp up of deportations and immigration enforcement detentions. We've seen an increase in forced family separations. We've seen an increase of contact with police, with the court system, with child protective services as a result of immigration enforcement. At the same time, there are extensive fears for survivors who may be dealing with threats from perpetrators around threatening immigration enforcement, deportation, withholding IDs and documentation, the use of language barriers or isolation as a form of control. In addition to that, and as a result, survivors may stay longer in unsafe situations to protect their children. Next slide, please. So, in terms of protections and where they may fall short, there are some structural gaps. First of all, in terms of survivors, many survivors are undocumented and may not have legal status, may not qualify for public benefits, and may face an extremely long backlog for immigration relief. Immigration status is challenging and can limit housing options, restrict access to domestic violence shelters, and increase economic dependence on perpetrators. As a result, child welfare implications may mean that safety planning is constrained by legal and economic realities of survivors who may be managing legal status, economic insecurities, and removal may unintentionally increase harm or instability as a result. Next slide, please. In terms of the Violence Against Women Act and how it pertains to immigrants, in this case, immigration relief pathways for certain survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and extreme cruelty is under the purview of VAWA. However, due to immigration status, there is a possibility of challenges because of the possibility of work authorization, lawful status, and independence from an abusive spouse or parent being complicated. VAWA does not protect from or allow for necessarily, it is not automatic, it's not immediate. It requires extreme documentation, credibility, and time for documentation to be filed. Survivors also may not know that they are eligible for VAWA because of if they are in a regularizing their status. And so, as a result, a key takeaway is that legal screening is a must. It's important to speak about VAWA with potential survivors who may be eligible. Next slide, please. Finally, in terms of practice implications, it's important that for those of us who are working with survivors, we must document coercion, threats, and barriers very clearly. We must partner early and ongoing with domestic violence and immigration legal advocates. We must build strong partnerships with immigration legal services, shelters that serve and culturally responsibly serve immigrant survivors. And we must also partner with those community-based cultural organizations that are at the helm of doing this important work, many of whom have spoken today. We also must be aware that safety plans must be immigration informed and take into account the fear right now that survivors who are immigrants are having around police, around court systems, like has already been mentioned. Also, safety plans that are aware of the lack of ID or documentation that individuals may have, and same thing for employment restrictions that may be present. And a quote that I think is really relevant is that when systems are unsafe, survivors must adapt. And so our job as practitioners is not to punish this type of adaptation, but simply to reduce harm. That's our goal. Next slide, please. And so in closing, it's important that we connect with local resources. Again, many who've been present on this summit today. We have some resources here around how to find help. And I'll advance to the next slide. Again, next slide. Just want to echo that the Center on Immigration and Child Welfare is a resource that you can connect with. We have 3 professional networks, one being an immigration and child welfare practice network. We have a research work group, and we have a legal network, all of whom works at the intersections of immigration, child welfare, and domestic violence. Next slide, please. For your information, we have some publications and resources that you can review. And next slide, please. And we also have some online training opportunities that are inclusive, that are free, and that center trauma-informed practices with immigrants and supporting immigrant children and families in the child welfare system. Next slide. Ways to stay connected. Encourage you to connect with us at the Center on Immigration and Child Welfare, and we'll end there. Thank you so much.
Christina, thank you so much for your presentation, and many thanks to the rest of our panel as well. We will be sure to share all of those resources with our guests today in our post-event recap. Thank you again to our panel. I hope it helps us see that despite all of the wonderful progress, that we still have much to do. And I'm sure many of you know that who are here today, and we look forward to doing that work together.
Today's summit has been an informative exploration of the progress achieved, the lessons that shape current practice, and the emerging opportunities to further strengthen safety, stability, and well-being for survivors and their children.
We value your feedback, and if you could take a moment to complete the following feedback form, we would greatly appreciate it. You can also follow us on social media at UCLA Pritzker, and the recording of this conversation will be posted tomorrow.
Once again, let's thank our speakers and the Blue Shield Foundation of California for supporting this event. We thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to the more work together down the road. Take care.